Welcome, everybody, to the Retail Corner podcast. We're very excited today to have Liz Alessi. Liz Alessi has a very extensive history in the retail industry. She's been with Victoria's Secret, she's been with Marc Jacobs, and today she stands as Senior Consultant to the Executive Creative Director at Coach. How are you doing today, Liz?
I'm great. How are you?
Oh, pretty good, pretty good. Enjoying great weather. I hear you're having amazing weather as well, right?
The weather is perfect, absolutely. And we have some weeks in Europe coming up too, so I'm excited to travel again and get out of the city.
Oh, that's so amazing. So, how is it been going now that everything's back to normal? Have you guys now really started to do your travel, or are you sticking a lot with like web conferencing? How is that flow going?
It's a little bit of both. I think people are definitely traveling again. There are some things that you just can't do over Zoom. And so I think everyone feels comfortable enough to travel and get those things going. But
Mhm.
also I think we've learned how to work very efficiently and very well over Zoom. So, I'm very comfortable doing both.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I think it has increased the efficiency of a lot of employees, right, across the industry. But to your point, there's certain things that they're face to face, right? It builds that rapport, it builds that connection that you
Yeah.
just cannot have over a computer.
And when
Absolutely.
you're building product too, you need to touch the product. You need to touch the material. So that's important.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So today we're going to be talking obviously about your areas of expertise, which is, sourcing and creating those sourcing structures and how the fashion, industry really dictates that, or it helps a lot in that process, right? So, but before we do that, give us a little bit of feedback for all the listeners out there, right? That are maybe not so familiar with what sourcing is and how fashion products really help dictate what the structure should be for that sourcing process.
Yeah, that's a big question to start with, but I'll do my best. So really the sourcing world is about finding materials and manufacturers that are going to build and make the products that the brand really wants. And there are so many different factors that go into it. The thing that I most care about, and I think that a lot of people in fashion are considering more and more, is what is the effect of these choices on our environment and on our people that we're working with. So we're not just creating more and more product out there in the world, but how are we creating that product and what materials are we using to go into that product? And then what can we do with that product at the end of its life when the customer no longer wants that product? So it's a very complex question, and I'm sure we'll get into more of the detail like as we move along.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much for kind of giving us that overview. And I really enjoy that you bring something up that I've seen very interesting, especially with the consumer shopping habits, right? There is a vast interest about what is making those raw materials. How is that purse made? How is that sweater made? And now I think more than ever, correct me if I'm wrong, consumers really care about that, especially the young professionals, that target audience between early 20s, early 30s, that's their main interest, right? It's not even so much the logo, it's not even so much if it's a high-end brand or middle-end brand. It's more about obviously the uniqueness of the product, but most importantly what that product is made and if it's helping the environment and if it's helping that process to kind of that go green type of effect and mentality that the youth really has and the awareness they have for the environment. And with that, how do you see like shopping habits processing? I mean, have you really seen that change, or is it transitioning over to other target audiences, or is it just really the youth that really cares about what those products are made of?
No, I actually think that it's more broad than just saying Gen Z or the youth. I think it's that there is a consumer, there's a growing number of consumers, I should say, to your point, who are
Mhm.
very interested in this. And unfortunately, it's a little bit of a complex landscape, and it can be confusing. There is a lot of greenwashing out there. There are claims being made that may or may not be true, and I think all the intentions are good. It's
Mhm.
just that some of these things are a little bit more emerging in terms of our even understanding of them, whether it's regenerative agriculture or certifying the carbon footprint of something. It's not always as easy as I don't know, leather working group, standard, gold standard. Like that's something we know, it's tangible. We've been doing it for years. How do you certify something that's made from kelp, for example? Maybe you don't know. So a lot
Hmm.
of it is just emerging. So I think that anyone who's trying to do something that is better than what was done before deserves kudos. But we're all on this sort of learning curve together. And as hopefully more and more it will become less competitive just in general, and we can start to work together more in really understanding how to find these materials and how to certify them. So in terms of the customer, you do have to ask some of those questions. Like, you can't just say something is sustainable. That doesn't mean anything anymore. The word doesn't mean anything anymore. So what does it
Hmm.
mean to be sustainable? What kind of certifications, third party certifications and verifications do you have that back up your claim? And from a consumer standpoint, we found too that consumers are much more interested in vintage and one of a kind pieces, because fashion is an expression of oneself. You wear something because you want to feel a certain way, or you want to be perceived as in a certain way. And so carrying something, whether it's a handbag or a wallet, that is one of a kind, that's really special, there's a market for it. Like Coach has just not that long ago launched something called Coach Reloved, where we're taking older product and redesigning them in some way. So if there's a little scratch on the front of it, maybe we'll put a patch on it and then resell it. And the sales are through the roof. People love this because it's unique. It's good for the world. We're diverting any product from going to landfill. Not that it was ever going to landfill, but
Yeah.
you know, there's so much positive energy around it that we see a much more expanding business in the future.
Yeah. No, and talking about that, I saw Coach did that, and I also saw they did a lot of initiatives with collaborations with different artists, right? Like across the industry, from Michael Basquiat to artists from Asia and different type of artists, and I've seen that be such an amazing success, right? Because to your point, looking for that uniqueness and that correlation, I feel like the art world is more present ever in everyday life of the consumer than ever before. It's like people now really identify and appreciate art, and to mix that with merchandise, I think that was just genius.
Yes, that would be our executive creative director, Stuart Favors, who is a brilliant man.
Oh, that's amazing. That is amazing. And so, talking about, I'm sure you guys have a bunch of projects and a lot of things going on over there, Coach. What is probably like the most exciting project, or the one that really thrives you on, that's going on right now?
Well, it's a really good question. Because I am excited about so many things. And in the role that I'm doing now, it's really early development. So it's advanced development. I'm working on things that, might not be in the market for 2 years, sometimes 5 years, depending. But I think that, broadly speaking, one of the most exciting areas of the work, that sourcing people, to get back to your original question, if you're going to be really good at sourcing now, you have
Hmm.
to be really good at resourcing and using waste, because waste is really, the elephant in the room for a lot of the issues that fashion brands have, whether it's extra finished product. I'm sure you've seen it in the news. To finished product, whether it's cutting room scrap, whether it's take back product, whether it's damaged goods. So, how do we deal with what we have in resourcing existing materials to utilize them in new product, rather than
Hmm.
going out and finding new materials, which is historically, what I've been doing for 20 years. The next big thing is, how do we use the materials we have? What is the best way to recycle leather? Leather is a profoundly valuable material. It's not so much valuable to the total value of the cow, for example, but it's a material that lasts forever, and it's meant to last forever. So you want to keep it in the hands of the consumer as long as possible by creating product that has really excellent quality. Then you want to help repair so we can get it back to the consumer so they can have it in their hands longer. But then as you get lower down the value chain, we have
Hmm.
to start using this material in a different way. So one of my favorite projects is a recycled leather project that I'm working on with this interesting company, where we're making a new leather material out of scrap material.
Oh, wow. Wow. And how is that? Is that going to be have the same durability, and it's going to have same type of like level that you would expect from the leather, or is it just?
I'll give you a sneak peek because this is not an official Coach style, but I can show you sort of what's we made a prototype bag out of this material.
Oh, nice.
It looks pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That looks awesome. That looks so exciting. And when you're talking about recycling, I have this question that just came to mind. So I know, like Apple, for example, right? They have this huge campaign, which is how they keep. Really, it's been a genius campaign, which is how they keep their end products, right? Which is pushing the customer to recycle back the products, right? And they're almost like buying back the products of older versions from the consumers to try to keep that upscale, right? And why to have the latest iPhone, why to have the latest AirPods, et cetera, et cetera. With this, do you foresee the retail industry when it comes to clothing taking some initiatives into that as you're looking to recycle and kind of pushing the customer into, hey, now that you have an older product, maybe you're not using it, maybe it's stored away, you're thinking of throwing it away, come back to the store, get some sort of credit, and get the latest and greatest that we have going on so that you guys can then, to your point, use those old merchandise as your source, or not, maybe not the only source, but one of your sources of having materials to recreate products with.
Absolutely. And there are so many brands that have been doing it longer than Coach has. But we have started doing a take back program.
Mhm.
And then that ties into the earlier project of what do we do with that material then? What do we do with those bags when we do take them back? So if they can be reloved, we would relove them, or if they need to be dismantled and then use the parts for recycling, whether it's recycled leather or downcycling. So it's one of the biggest opportunities and one of the biggest challenges that brands have today. And the more complex your finished good is, so if you take a pair of jeans, you have only a few elements that go into the jeans. It's mostly, it's denim, it's some hardware, it's some stitching.
Mhm.
Take a Coach handbag. There's probably 50 different ingredients in that bag, from
Wow.
glue to filler to different hardware pieces. And it's a complex problem for us as a brand and for all leather goods. And footwear has been sort of leading the charge too. There are a lot of, especially athletic footwear brands, that are taking product back and have figured out what to do with that. But it's the biggest, like I said, opportunity because you can
Mhm.
monetize it.
Mhm.
Also the biggest challenge. And the more technology, the more big brains that go into solving this problem, the faster we're going to get there. So I'm excited to be working with a few different companies that are really pushing that and trying to figure it out.
Yeah. No, 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 absolutely. And talking about technology, right? What is one emerging technology, to your point, that will make a big impact in the years to come?
All right. Well, one of my favorites, I could talk about this forever, but one of my favorites is algae and kelp. So this is, I'm calling this aqua derived, but I think they're calling it like blue technology,
Okay.
rather than green. So it's not coming from a plant; it's coming from algae or kelp, which you may or may not know is one of the fastest growing organisms in the world, and it sequesters CO2 while it's growing, and then it can be harvested. But while it's growing, it is helping the wildlife in the water, or whatever, wherever you're growing it, whether it's a farm or whether it's in your shoreline.
Mhm.
And so it's sequestering the carbon. Then you can use the kelp, and it grows back. And you can make so many different things from algae and kelp. There's a wonderful company that I've been working with called Living Ink, that makes black dye. Right now, they're doing printing on packaging for Patagonia. They just launched a T-shirt with Nike printing on the T-shirt,
Wow.
and I'm working with that company to make leather, black leather. And they're a really wonderful company. But I think a real emerging technology, replacing petrocarbon with algae or kelp material, some kind of a biomaterial.
Wow, that's amazing. That is so amazing. That is great.
Yes.
And let me ask you, when it comes to all the brands, right, and all the different initiatives that are out there, and of course, brands trying to stand out to be different, because different is what's attracting the consumer to what everything we've been talking about, right? What do you feel like brands tend to miss when they talk about the true cost of their products, when they're trying to analyze that piece? Where do you see opportunities there?
Yeah, I think this is a really big problem, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. It's not a very popular topic for brands to be discussing, but I'll speak from a just historical perspective without using any brand name at all. This is just
Hmm.
how it works in
The
retail.
trends that you've seen, yeah.
Yeah, so over the years, manufacturing, for example, has, maybe let's say it started in the US and then it moved to South America and then it moved to China and then everyone had to get out of China to go to Vietnam. And then now maybe you're manufacturing in Myanmar or somewhere like that. Um, Historically speaking, brands have been looking for quality but low cost manufacturing. Like that's what the goal would be in terms of going overseas. Now during the pandemic, I think the conversation has started to switch a little bit because there are two things that don't show up on a cost sheet, a traditional cost sheet. One is your CO2 impact, whether you're shipping material all around the world, what does that really look like? You pay the cost of the shipping, but not the CO2 impact of the shipping. And there is no social line item on the cost sheet either. So there's no line item saying this is what we're going to be doing to help the people, making sure they have a living wage, etc. Now there's everything. These brands work in a very compliant way. But by no means am I saying that anything is happening that shouldn't be happening. But
Hmm.
I think there needs to be a more overt conversation, especially about the CO2 impact. So, this is public knowledge that a lot of leather hides come from the US. There aren't that many tanneries left here in the US. So that material gets shipped overseas. Then it's made into leather, but then it may or may not be made into finished goods wherever the leather was made. So then that finished leather has to be shipped to a manufacturing, and then the manufacturing is going to ship to a DC in another location.
Hmm.
So, and there are all kinds of stats out there that I'm sure you could Google up that say, like, this thing has traveled X number of miles, or like one time around the planet or something. So I think it's a big conversation that I think is going to become more and more of a topic because of petrol prices, because of shutdowns due to COVID, because of port congestion, and raw material prices globally are fluctuating so much.
Yeah, yeah. Inflation is hitting everything. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one last question I have for you, and I always like to ask this of everybody. Um, to everybody that listens out there, right? From executives to entrepreneurs to folks that are just maybe even thinking about starting their business and where to go and what's the best route. What is the one piece of advice that you would like to leave them with out of all the things you've experienced and you've been able to learn to your career?
Oh, I think that that's sort of an easy one. It's the people. It's surrounding yourself with people who are like-minded and are excited to work on projects that are forward-thinking and open-minded, innovators, people that really get things done. The no one likes to sit in the meeting and say, okay, let's have a photo up in 2 weeks, and there's nothing that should be done in the 2 weeks. So I think making sure that you're always building a network, making sure that your doors are open and your mind is open to thinking about new things. Unfortunately, like, it's human nature. The longer you do something, the more kind of set in your ways you get. But starting to think about learning something brand new, even if it's something that you've done in the past, like thinking sourcing is a great example. Source
Mhm.
new things is something that we all know how to do. That's what we've been doing for however many years we've been doing it. Now, thinking about how to resource things or how to upcycle things or how to recycle things, that's the new sourcing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. It was so informative. It was so great. It's so exciting all the things you're working on, and then we definitely look to forward into it. I think I would love to maybe have a conversation in a year and see, where you have these ideas and these initiatives, where they've been, how they've processed and how they've changed, and obviously more important, how they've affected our planet and how they've affected our industry. But it
Yes.
was a pleasure having you, and thank you so much. And I think for everybody out there, we will have Liz's information down here on the footer. So if you need help, if you need advice, I mean, she's a very well versed person when it comes to sourcing and resourcing and innovating in between within that industry and within that capsule. So thank you so much, Liz. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. Stay tuned.
If you would like to be featured on our podcast, please email us at podcast@retailcorner.live or visit our website, retailcorner.live. Looking forward to having you as our guest on our podcast, and thank you so much for listening.